The darkness of space suddenly erupted with bright flashes as 12 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal and glowing energy conduits that pulsed like veins carrying life through their mechanical bodies. Each ship was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars. Captain Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, watching the tactical display with growing satisfaction. His 4 eyes focused on the single blip that represented their target. After months of hunting through empty space and finding nothing but scraps, they had finally discovered something worth taking. Target confirmed, Captain, his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking with excitement. Single vessel, human origin, appears to be a cargo freighter. No escort ships detected. Veltar's mouth twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The Zephyrians had once been the terror of 3 star systems, but recent years had been cruel to them. The galaxy had grown more dangerous, trade routes had shifted, and easy prey had become scarce. They needed this victory to restore their reputation and fill their empty coffers. "Scan it thoroughly," Veltar ordered. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The sensor officer's claws danced across his console. The vessel is approximately 200 meters in length. Hull composition appears to be standard titanium steel alloy with ceramic plating. Drive signature indicates a basic fusion engine, probably 3rd or 4th generation. No obvious weapon signatures detected. "What about the cargo?" Veltar asked, already calculating potential profits. "Sensors show multiple storage compartments, but we cannot penetrate their shielding to determine contents. Could be anything, from rare metals to processed foods." Veltar nodded approvingly. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their merchant tendencies. They would trade anything with anyone, often carrying valuable goods through dangerous territory with minimal protection. It made them ideal targets for raiders like the Zephyrians. The human ship drifted slowly through space, apparently unaware of the fleet that had surrounded it. Its hull showed signs of wear and age, with discolored patches where repairs had been made and small meteor impacts had left their marks. The ship looked tired, like an old merchant who had spent too many years traveling dangerous roads. "Range to target?" Veltar inquired. 15,000 kilometers and closing, Captain. All weapons are charged and ready. Boarding pods? Prepared and standing by. Assault teams are armed and eager for action. Veltar studied the human ship on his main screen. It continued its lazy drift, showing no signs of alarm or defensive preparations. The humans aboard probably had no idea they were about to become prisoners, their ship and cargo claimed as prizes for the Zephyrian fleet. "Communications, open a channel to the other ships," Veltar commanded. "All captains, this is Veltar. We have found our prize at last. The humans have grown soft and careless. This will be the victory that reminds the galaxy why they should fear the Zephyrian name." Acknowledgements came back from the other 11 ships. Captain Thexra of the Void Render was particularly enthusiastic, her ship moving into position to cut off any possible escape route. Captain Morden of the Star Piercer reported his boarding teams were ready to breach the human hull and secure the cargo holds. The Zephyrian fleet had perfected this operation over decades of raiding. They would surround their target, demand, surrender, and if refused, disable the ship's engines before boarding. Resistance was usually minimal once the crew realized they were outnumbered and outgunned. Most merchants preferred to lose their cargo rather than their lives. "Signal from the Deathwing, Captain," the communications officer reported. Captain Zarkoth reports optimal positioning achieved. All ships are now in attack formation. Veltar looked at the tactical display again. The 12 Zephyrian warships had formed a perfect sphere around the human vessel, with overlapping fields of fire that would prevent any escape. Each ship was positioned to provide maximum firepower while protecting the others from potential counterattack. "The humans have nowhere to run now," the tactical officer observed with satisfaction. Indeed, Veltar agreed. Begin standard intimidation protocol. Let them see our weapons charging. Fear often makes negotiations much simpler. Across the fleet, massive plasma cannons began to glow with contained energy. Missile launchers opened their ports, revealing the deadly warheads within. Shield generators hummed to life, creating shimmering barriers around each ship. The display of force was meant to convince any reasonable captain that resistance was futile. The human ship continued its oblivious drift, apparently unaware that 12 of the most dangerous warships in this sector had it surrounded. No defensive. Systems activated. No distress calls were transmitted. No attempt was made to change course or increase speed. They must be asleep at their posts, one of the bridge officers commented, drawing laughter from his colleagues. Or perhaps they have already accepted their fate, another suggested. Humans are supposedly intelligent. They must realize they cannot fight 12 warships with a single cargo freighter. Veltar was beginning to feel almost disappointed. He had hoped for at least some challenge, some display of the legendary human stubbornness they had heard about. Instead, they seemed to be dealing with a crew of incompetents who could not even properly monitor their sensor arrays. "Time to contact, Captain?" he asked. "We will be within optimal communication range in 30 seconds, the communications officer replied. "Good. Prepare the standard surrender demand. Make it clear that cooperation will be rewarded with survival, while resistance will result in death." The Zephyrian fleet continued its approach, weapons charged and ready. The human ship grew larger on their screens, its weathered hull and simple design making it appear even more vulnerable. Veltar could already imagine the fear in the human crew's voices when they realized their situation. "Communication range achieved, Captain," came the report. "Open the channel," Veltar commanded, straightening to his full, imposing height. "Let us introduce ourselves to our new prisoners." The main screen flickered to life, showing the external view of the human ship. It looked even more pathetic up close, with obvious signs of mechanical stress and hasty repairs. Whatever cargo it carried, it was probably the only thing of value aboard such a decrepit vessel. Veltar smiled his predatory smile and prepared to deliver the news that would change these humans' lives forever. In a few moments, they would learn that their peaceful merchant voyage had come to an abrupt and permanent end. Their ship, their cargo, and their freedom now belonged to the Zephyrian Consortium. The moment of victory was at hand. Captain Veltar activated the communication system, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had terrorized merchant vessels across 3 star systems. The standard Zephyrian surrender demand had been refined over decades of successful raids designed to strike fear into the hearts of their victims while offering just enough hope for survival to prevent desperate last stands. "Attention, human vessel," Veltar began, his words transmitted across space on all standard frequencies. "You are now surrounded by the warships of the Zephyrian Consortium. Your situation is hopeless. Lower your shields, shut down your engines, and prepare for immediate boarding. Cooperation will ensure your survival. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your ship and the death of your crew. You have 60 seconds to comply." At Thuray, message echoed through space, bouncing off the hulls of the surrounding warships and racing toward the human freighter. On the bridge of the Crimson Talon, the crew waited for the expected response. Usually, there would be stammering confusion, desperate pleas for mercy, or angry defiance followed quickly by reluctant surrender. Instead, silence stretched for several seconds. Then a voice came back over the communication channel, calm and relaxed as if the speaker was discussing the weather with an old friend. "Oh, hey there, folks. Nice ships you've got. Really impressive looking. Mind if I ask what brings you to this neck of the woods?" The Zephyrian bridge crew looked at each other in confusion. The human voice was male, middle-aged perhaps, with an accent that suggested he came from one of the outer colonies. More importantly, he sounded completely unconcerned about his situation. Veltar's mandibles clicked in irritation. Human, you seem to misunderstand your circumstances. You are about to be boarded and your cargo confiscated. This is not a social visit. Well now, that doesn't sound very neighborly, the human voice replied with what sounded like genuine disappointment. I was hoping we could work something out. Maybe discuss this over coffee? I've got some excellent beans from Rigel 7. Real eye-opener, if you know what I mean. The tactical officer leaned toward Veltar and whispered, Captain, should we proceed with the boarding action? The human appears to be either insane or suffering from some form of mental breakdown. Veltar considered this possibility. Space madness was not uncommon among long-haul freighter crews, especially those who spent months alone between systems. Perhaps the isolation had affected this human's ability to process his situation rationally. Human vessel, Veltar said, speaking more slowly and clearly, you are surrounded by 12 warships. Each one carries enough firepower to reduce your ship to particles. You cannot escape. You cannot fight. Your only option is immediate surrender. There was another pause, shorter this time. When the human voice returned, it carried a note of mild annoyance. Look, I really appreciate the heads up about your fleet and all, but I'm kind of busy right now. If you folks want to chat, maybe we could schedule something for later. Say, next Tuesday? I should have some free time around 1400 hours. Several of the Zephyrian officers began making gestures that indicated they thought the human had lost his mind entirely. Veltar felt his patience reaching its limit. He had dealt with panicked merchants, angry traders, and defiant cargo runners, but never someone who seemed to think a raid was a minor inconvenience to be rescheduled. Enough of this nonsense, Veltar snarled. Weapons officer, fire a warning shot across their bow. Perhaps the sight of our plasma cannons will help clarify their situation. Yes, Captain. Firing warning shot now. The main plasma cannon of the Crimson Talon discharged with a brilliant flash of contained stellar fire. The energy bolt streaked across space, designed to pass close enough to the human ship to demonstrate the Zephyrians' power without causing actual damage. It was a time-tested intimidation tactic that usually brought immediate compliance from even the most stubborn crews. The plasma bolt struck the human ship's hull directly. The sensor officer stared at his instruments in disbelief. Captain, the shot hit their starboard section, but there's no damage reported. Their hull integrity remains at 100%. What? Veltar spun to face the tactical display. That's impossible. Our plasma cannons can punch through military-grade armor plating. Sensors confirm, sir. The energy was absorbed or dispersed, somehow. No visible damage to the target vessel. The human voice came back over the communication channel, and now it definitely sounded less friendly than before. Well, that was rude. I was hoping we could settle this diplomatically, but shooting at folks isn't exactly the best way to start a conversation. Veltar stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. A civilian cargo freighter should not have been able to absorb a direct hit from a Zephyrian plasma cannon. The energy required to generate such defensive capability would power a small city. Scan them again, he ordered. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The sensor officer's claws clicked rapidly across his console. Running deep scans now, Captain. Initial readings are unusual. Define unusual. The hull appears to be composed of multiple layers, sir. The outer layer matches standard human construction materials, but beneath that... The officer paused, checking his readings twice. Sir, I'm detecting energy signatures that don't match any known civilian technology. Veltar felt the first stirrings of unease in his stomach. What kind of energy signatures? The pattern suggests military-grade shield generators, Captain. But the output levels are far beyond anything in our database, also detecting what appear to be weapon systems. But again, the power readings are inconsistent with known human civilian vessels. On the main screen, the human ship continued its lazy drift through space. From the outside, it still looked like nothing more than an aging freighter, worn down by years of honest trade runs. But now Veltar was beginning to suspect that appearances might be deceiving. "Captain," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving another transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through." The calm human voice filled the bridge again, but now there was an undertone that made several of the Zephyrian crew members nervous. "I'm going to give you folks one chance to reconsider your current course of action. My ship may not look like much, but looks can be deceiving. Why don't you take your fleet and find somewhere else to be? Consider it friendly advice from someone who's been around the galaxy a few times." Veltar's pride warred with his growing suspicion that something was very wrong with this situation. The Zephyrian consortium had not built its fearsome reputation by backing down from single cargo ships, no matter how strange they might seem. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet, "maintain positions and prepare for full-scale assault. There's something unusual about this vessel, but 12 against 1 are still favorable odds." As the Zephyrian warships began charging their weapons for a coordinated attack, none of them noticed the subtle changes beginning to occur on the surface of the human ship. Panels that had seemed permanently sealed began to shift slightly. Energy, readings that had been carefully masked, started to climb toward levels that would soon become impossible to hide. The game was about to change in ways that none of the Zephyrians could have imagined. The transformation began slowly, almost imperceptibly. What had appeared to be random rust patches and wear marks on the human ship's hull started to shift and move. The discolored sections that the Zephyrians had mistaken for battle damage began to separate from the main hull with mechanical precision. Captain Veltar watched his sensor displays with growing alarm as energy readings from the human vessel spiked beyond anything his instruments had ever recorded. "What in the seven hells is happening to that ship?" The sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Captain, the outer hull sections are retracting. It appears to be some form of adaptive camouflage system. The true hull beneath is... Sir, I've never seen anything like this." On the main screen, the human ship was revealing its true nature, like a predator shedding its sheep's clothing. The rusted, weathered panels folded away like flower petals opening to the sun, exposing gleaming armor plating that reflected the light of distant stars. What had seemed like a tired old freighter was transforming into something magnificent and terrifying. "Those aren't cargo compartments," the tactical officer whispered. "Those are weapon bays." As the disguise fell away completely, the Zephyrians found themselves staring at a vessel that dwarfed their own warships. The human ship was easily 5 times larger than it had appeared, its true dimensions hidden by sophisticated holographic projectors and retractable hull sections. Massive weapon arrays emerged from concealed ports, each cannon larger than anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. "By the void," someone whispered on the bridge. "It's a dreadnought." The communication channel crackled to life again, but now the voice that came through was female, crisp with military authority, and completely different from the relaxed merchant they had been speaking with before. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, of the United Earth Navy Dreadnought Retribution. You have just attempted to attack a military vessel of the Terran Federation. Under the terms of the Galactic Warfare Convention, this constitutes an act of war against humanity." Veltar's blood turned to ice in his veins. The Terran Federation was not some small merchant fleet or colonial defense force. It was the military arm of one of the galaxy's most aggressive and successful expanding species. Humans had earned a reputation for tactical brilliance and absolutely ruthless efficiency in warfare. "Sir," the communications officer reported, his voice shaking, "all Zephyrian vessels are requesting immediate orders. Captain Thexra is asking if we should attempt to withdraw." The massive human dreadnought continued its rotation, bringing more of its weapon systems to bear on the Zephyrian fleet. Each movement was smooth and controlled, like a dancer performing a carefully choreographed routine. But this dance was one of death. and the Zephyrians were about to become unwilling partners. "Full retreat," Veltar ordered, his pride finally overwhelmed by survival instinct. "All ships emergency withdrawal. Maximum speed to hyperspace jump coordinates." But before any of the Zephyrian ships could begin their escape, the human vessel demonstrated just how outclassed they truly were. Energy readings spiked again as the Retribution activated systems that made the Zephyrian technology look like primitive tools from a pre-space civilization. "Unable to engage hyperspace drives, Captain," the navigation officer reported with panic in his voice. "Something is jamming our jump systems." Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel, again calm and professional. "I'm afraid I can't allow you to leave just yet. You see, you've provided us with a perfect opportunity to gather some intelligence on Zephyrian fleet operations. My ship's electronic warfare suite is currently downloading your navigation databases, communication logs, and tactical information." Veltar watched helplessly as his ship's most secure systems were invaded and stripped bare by human technology that operated on principles he couldn't even begin to understand. Decades of carefully gathered intelligence about trade routes, hidden bases, and fleet positions were being stolen in a matter of minutes. "How is this possible?" he demanded, speaking as much to himself as to his crew. The answer came from Captain Chen, who apparently could monitor their internal communications as easily as their external transmissions. "You're wondering how a single human ship can outclass 12 Zephyrian warships? The answer is simple. You've been hunting merchants and cargo runners for so long that you've forgotten what a real military vessel looks like. The Retribution completed its rotation, and now its full arsenal was visible to the Zephyrian fleet. Weapon systems that violated several galactic conventions on warfare were openly displayed, along with defensive systems that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, designed not just to fight, but to absolutely dominate any opposition. "Sir," the tactical officer whispered, "those weapon signatures, some of them are reading as planet killers." Veltar slumped in his command chair as the full scope of his mistake became clear. The Zephyrians hadn't stumbled upon easy prey. They had walked into a trap set by one of the most dangerous military forces in the galaxy. "The disguise," he said suddenly, understanding, flooding through him. "You were hunting us." Captain Chen's voice carried a note of approval. "Very good, Captain Veltar. Yes, we've been tracking your fleet for several months. The Retribution has been masquerading as a merchant vessel, using herself as bait to identify and locate raiders operating in this sector." "But why?" Veltar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. "Because the Terran Federation takes a very dim view of attacks on human shipping. Every merchant vessel you've raided, every cargo ship you've destroyed, every crew you've killed or enslaved has been meticulously documented. We've been building a case against your entire organization. The human dreadnought's weapons systems hummed with barely contained power. Each cannon was capable of cracking a moon, and there were dozens of them pointed at the Zephyrian fleet. But Captain Chen wasn't interested in simple destruction. This was about sending a message that would echo across the galaxy. "Your fleet will be impounded," Chen continued. "Your crews will be tried for piracy under Terran law, and the information we've gathered from your databases will be used to dismantle the rest of the Zephyrian consortium." Veltar realized that his entire species' way of life was about to come to an end. The Zephyrians had been raiders for centuries, taking what they needed from those too weak to defend themselves. But now they had finally encountered someone stronger, and the reckoning had arrived. "Sir," the sensor officer reported quietly, "I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching our position." On the tactical display, dozens of new contacts began appearing as more human warships dropped out of hyperspace. The single dreadnought had been joined by an entire battle fleet, each ship bristling with weapons that made Zephyrian technology look like ancient relics. Captain Chen's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Welcome to the new reality, Captain Veltar. The age of Zephyrian piracy is over. The Terran Federation fleet materialized around the trapped Zephyrian ships like wolves surrounding wounded prey. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her tactical display filled with friendly contacts. Each new arrival represented months of careful planning and coordination, a military operation designed to end the Zephyrian threat permanently. Fleet status report, Chen requested from her communications officer. All ships reporting ready for operations, Captain. Admiral Morrison aboard the Nemesis is requesting permission to begin Phase 2 of the operation. Chen nodded approvingly. The Terran Federation didn't do anything by halves, especially when it came to protecting human interests. The Zephyrian Consortium had been a persistent thorn in the side of human expansion, raiding merchant convoys and disrupting trade routes for over a decade. Today that would end. Permission granted. Signal all ships to begin coordinated strikes. On Zephyrian installations, across human space, the largest military operation in Federation history was beginning. Ships that had been positioned at strategic locations throughout the galaxy started moving toward targets that had been identified through months of intelligence gathering. The information now being extracted from the Zephyrian fleet's databases was simply the final piece of a puzzle that human military intelligence had been assembling for years. Captain Veltar watched in horror as his tactical display showed the scope of the human response. The 12 ships of his raiding fleet had triggered something far beyond their worst nightmares. Hundreds of human warships were moving through space with the precision of a clockwork mechanism, each one heading toward a different Zephyrian installation. Captain Chen, Veltar transmitted, his voice heavy with defeat. Surely this level of response is excessive for a simple piracy operation. Chen's reply came back immediately, her tone matter-of-fact and professional. Captain, you seem to be under the impression that the Zephyrian Consortium represents a simple piracy problem. Let me correct that misunderstanding. The main screen on the Retribution activated, showing a holographic display of the local galactic sector. Red markers appeared throughout the region, each one representing a Zephyrian base, outpost, or fleet position. Over the past 10 years, Chen continued, your organization has been responsible for the destruction of 47 human merchant vessels, the deaths of over 3,000 civilian crew members, and the theft of cargo worth approximately 2 billion Terran credits. You've disrupted trade routes, destabilized colonial economies, and forced us to divert significant military resources to escort duties. More red markers appeared on the display, showing the full extent of Zephyrian operations. Veltar had never realized how large his organization had grown, or how thoroughly the humans had been documenting their activities. The Terran Federation considers the Zephyrian Consortium to be a clear and present threat to human expansion and prosperity, Chen said. Today, we're removing that threat. On the tactical display, the first reports of successful strikes began coming in. The human fleet moved with devastating efficiency, hitting multiple targets simultaneously across dozens of star systems. Zephyrian bases that had been hidden for decades were located and destroyed within minutes of the attack's beginning. Veltar's communications officer reported with growing panic. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from installations throughout the sector. Base Gamma 7 has been destroyed. The shipyards at Kepler Station are under attack. The command center at... He paused, checking his readings again. Sir, the command center at Zephyr Prime is no longer responding. The Zephyrian homeworld. The humans had found and attacked the most heavily defended installation in their entire organization. Veltar felt his heart stop beating for a moment as he realized the implications. How? He whispered. Zephyr Prime's location is known only to fleet commanders. We never broadcast its coordinates or include them in standard navigation databases. Captain, Chen's voice carried a note of amusement. Captain, you're still thinking like a 20th century military commander. Human intelligence gathering operates on principles you can't even imagine. The truth was more disturbing than Veltar could have suspected. For years, the Terran Federation had been tracking Zephyrian movements using quantum resonance detectors that could follow hyperspace wakes across vast distances. Every jump the raiding fleets made left traces that human sensors could detect and analyze. The Zephyrians had been unwittingly leading their enemies straight to their most secret locations. Additionally, Chen continued, we've been monitoring your communications for the past 18 months. Your encryption systems are approximately 50 years behind current human standards. The human fleet's electronic warfare capabilities had allowed them to intercept and decode Zephyrian military traffic without the aliens ever knowing their security had been compromised. Fleet movements, base locations, supply schedules, and command decisions had all been observed and recorded by human intelligence services. Sir, the sensor officer on the Crimson Talon reported, long-range scanners are detecting human fleets moving against installations in the Rigel sector, the Vega colonies, and the Outer Rim territories. They appear to be hitting every major Zephyrian facility simultaneously. Veltar slumped in his command chair as the full scope of the disaster became clear. This wasn't just a military response to a piracy incident. This was the complete and systematic destruction of everything his people had built over the past century. The Retribution maneuvered closer to the trapped Zephyrian fleet, its massive bulk blocking out the stars. Chen's voice came over the communication channel again, but now it carried the weight of absolute authority. Captain Veltar, you and your crews are now prisoners of war. Your ships will be impounded and your personnel will be transported to Terran facilities for processing. Those found guilty of crimes against human citizens will face trial under Federation law. And the rest of our people? Veltar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Zephyrian Consortium as a military and political entity will cease to exist as of today. Individual Zephyrians who have not been involved in attacks on human interests will be allowed to resettle in designated areas under Federation oversight. Your species will have the opportunity to become productive members of galactic society, but your days as raiders are permanently over. Around the trapped Zephyrian ships, human boarding craft began launching from the Federation fleet. Each small vessel carried teams of Marines equipped with weapons and armor that made Zephyrian military equipment look primitive by comparison. Resistance would be not just futile, but suicidal. Sir, Veltar's tactical officer whispered, "What are your orders?" Veltar looked at his crew, seeing the fear and desperation in their faces. They had been warriors and raiders, proud inheritors of a tradition that stretched back to their species' earliest days in space. Now they were nothing more than criminals awaiting judgment from a superior civilization. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered quietly. "Prepare for boarding. The war is over, and we lost before we even knew it had begun." As the first human Marines began cutting through the hull of the Crimson Talon, Veltar reflected on the magnitude of his species' miscalculation. They had thought humans were soft, weak creatures concerned only with trade and profit. Instead, they had discovered a military force that operated with precision, intelligence, and ruthlessness that exceeded anything in Zephyrian experience. The galaxy would be a very different place tomorrow, and the Zephyrians would have to learn to live in it under human terms. 6 months after the destruction of the Zephyrian Consortium, Captain Veltar sat in a comfortable chair in what the humans called a debriefing room aboard the orbital station New Geneva. The facility served as the Terran Federation's primary intelligence and diplomatic center for this sector of the galaxy, and Veltar had spent most of the past half-year here, providing information about Zephyrian operations in exchange for more comfortable accommodations than a standard prison cell. Across from him sat Captain Sarah Chen, no longer wearing the combat uniform of a warship commander, but dressed in the formal attire of a Federation diplomatic officer. The transformation reflected the broader changes that had swept through this region of space since the Zephyrian defeat. "Your cooperation has been valuable, Captain," Chen said, reviewing the data pad in her hands. "The information you've provided has helped us locate the last of the consortium's hidden caches and sleeper cells." Veltar nodded slowly. "What choice did I have? My people's way of life was already dead. At least this way, some of them might survive to see a future." Through the large viewport behind Chen, Veltar could see the bustling activity of the stations. Docking bays. Ships from dozens of different species came and went in a constant stream of commerce and diplomacy. But now they all flew under the protection of human patrol fleets, and every vessel displayed the blue and white insignia that marked them as operating under Federation oversight. "The galaxy has adapted more quickly than we expected," Chen observed, following his gaze. "Trade routes that were disrupted by piracy for decades are now operating at full capacity. Colonial economies that struggled under the threat of raids are experiencing unprecedented growth, because everyone knows that attacking a ship flying under human protection means facing the full might of the Federation fleet," Veltar said bitterly. Chen didn't deny the accusation. Peace through strength has always been an effective strategy. The Romans understood it, the British Empire understood it, and now the Terran Federation understands it. The mention of ancient human civilizations reminded Veltar of one of the most disturbing things he had learned during his captivity. Humanity was not just technologically superior to the Zephyrians and most other galactic species. They were also historically experienced at the business of empire building in ways that most aliens couldn't comprehend. "Tell me something," Veltar said, leaning forward in his chair. "The ship that captured my fleet, the Retribution. How many others like it does the Federation have?" Chen smiled, and Veltar recognized the expression as one humans made when they were particularly pleased with themselves. "That's classified information, Captain. But I can tell you that the Retribution is not the most advanced vessel in our fleet." The implications of that statement were staggering. If the dreadnought that had single-handedly destroyed the Zephyrian consortium was not even humanity's best warship, then the Federation's military capabilities were beyond anything Veltar had imagined. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "The systematic destruction of my people's organization couldn't have been arranged overnight. We've been tracking Zephyrian activities since your first recorded attack on a human merchant vessel 12 years ago," Chen replied. "Every raid you conducted, every ship you destroyed, every life you took was documented and analyzed. We knew where your bases were located, how your command structure operated, and what your fleet capabilities were long before we decided to act." Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why wait so long? You could have destroyed us years ago." "Because the Federation doesn't act precipitously. We prefer to gather complete intelligence, develop comprehensive plans, and act decisively when the time is right. Your organization served as a useful case study in combating distributed piracy networks. The methods we developed to track and eliminate the Zephyrian consortium are now being applied to other criminal organizations throughout the galaxy." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Chen's communication device. She checked the message, and her expression became more serious. "It appears we have a new situation developing in the Andromeda sector," she said. "A species called the Vorthak has been conducting raids against shipping lanes near the outer colonies." Veltar watched as Chen's demeanor shifted from diplomatic courtesy to military efficiency. In that moment, he could see the predator that lurked beneath the civilized exterior, the same deadly intelligence that had orchestrated the downfall of his entire civilization. "Will you hunt them the same way you hunted us?" he asked. "If necessary," Chen replied without hesitation. "The Terran Federation has made it clear that attacks on human interests will not be tolerated. Species that choose to test that resolve tend to discover that we have very long memories and very efficient military forces." Through the viewport, Veltar could see a new group of ships preparing to depart from the station. The vessels were sleek and modern, bearing the distinctive design characteristics of Federation military craft. But several of them looked like simple merchant freighters or exploration vessels. "More disguised warships?" he asked, nodding toward the departing fleet. Chen followed his gaze and smiled again. Perhaps. The Federation has found that maintaining an element of surprise can be very useful in dealing with hostile species. Why advertise our military capabilities when we can let potential enemies underestimate us? The strategy was brutally effective, Veltar realized. By disguising their most advanced warships as civilian vessels, the humans could position overwhelming force anywhere in the galaxy without their enemies realizing the danger until it was too late. The Zephyrian Consortium had walked into a trap that had been decades in the making. "What happens to me now?" Veltar asked. "That depends on you," Chen replied. "Your species has valuable knowledge about this region of space, and many Zephyrians have skills that could be useful to Federation expansion efforts. Those who are willing to work within our system will find opportunities for productive lives. Those who insist on clinging to the old ways of piracy and raiding will find themselves in much less comfortable accommodations." Veltar understood the offer being made. The humans were not interested in genocide or slavery. They wanted to transform the Zephyrians from enemies into assets, incorporating their knowledge and abilities into the growing Federation empire. "And if I agree to work for you?" he asked. "You would be assigned to a Federation colonial administration team, helping to establish secure trade routes and diplomatic relations with newly contacted species. Your experience as a fleet commander would be valuable in assessing potential security threats." The irony was not lost on Veltar. The humans wanted to use his expertise in piracy to help them defend against other pirates. It was an elegant solution that would benefit both species while ensuring that former Zephyrian raiders could never again threaten Federation interests. "I accept," he said quietly. Chen nodded approvingly. "Excellent. You'll be assigned to the team investigating the Vorthak situation. Consider it an opportunity to help prevent another species from making the same mistakes your people made." As the meeting concluded and Veltar was escorted to his new quarters, he reflected on the transformation that had swept through his life and his entire civilization. The Zephyrian Consortium was gone, destroyed by a species that had proven superior in every measure that mattered. But perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. For the first time in decades, the shipping lanes were safe. Colonial settlements could grow and prosper without fear of raids. Trade flourished under the protection of Federation fleets. The galaxy was becoming a more peaceful and prosperous place, even if that peace was enforced by the overwhelming military superiority of a single species. The humans had not just defeated the Zephyrians, they had fundamentally changed the balance of power in this region of space, establishing themselves as the dominant force that would shape the future of dozens of civilizations. And they had done it all while making it appear that they were nothing more than peaceful merchants interested in trade and exploration. Veltar settled into his new quarters and began preparing for his next assignment. He would serve the Terran Federation faithfully, not out of loyalty but out of recognition that resistance was not just futile, but counterproductive. The humans had proven that they were the apex predators in this galaxy, and the wisest course was to find a place within their system rather than futilely opposing it. The age of Zephyrian independence was over. The age of human dominance had begun.